Let's bring up the man himself, Mr. George Lazenby. And director Josh Greenbaum.
Hey, how are you?
And Josh.
Josh.
Oh, sure, yes. And Josh Lawson, who played George.
So, first question for you guys. This was obviously a very fun movie to make. How did you guys get connected? How did you decide to kind of start making this film together?
Yeah, it started with a mutual friend of my producing partners, Chris Leggett and Rafi Marmor. A mutual friend of ours knows George, and we went and had lunch, right? We had many lunches.
Yeah.
Because I had read George's story, and much of it I couldn't quite believe if it was true or not. And I said, yeah, let's go meet him and sit down and have lunch. And instantly in the first lunch for me, I mean, first of all, his story was incredible. And more importantly, he's an incredible storyteller, as you can see. But it took some convincing, right, George? What I loved about him is he wasn't a subject who was like, yeah, let's go make a movie about myself. We had to do like 5 lunches. You weren't quite sure. And that's a good sign, I feel like, in a doc subject who's like
not lack of education.
Yeah, not knowing us, I guess, but,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I've been conned a few times in my life, and mainly by women. I listen to them because I think I'm going to get somewhere. But meanwhile, my life's been not always as fun as it sounds. I think, to keep your motor running, you've got to have the downs as well as the ups. Otherwise, you'd fall over getting bored, as I see some rich people doing. I thank God I'm not them. But, most people, I'm against a lot of the philosophies in life that people think they have to follow. I had that great escape when I was young. It wasn't in the movie, but the nurses, the buggers, they taught me how to read and write while I was in hospital for 18 months. So that part wasn't in there.
There's a lot that wasn't in there. We did about 5 days of like 8-hour interviews, so there's like an anthology. We could make more movies on
Yeah,
your
but
life,
that was important because it made me... It put me behind the 8 ball.
I'm sorry, George, you're right.
It put me behind the 8 ball because when you can go to school at 5 and you can read and write, and you go there by yourself without your mother to sign yourself in, they send you home to get your mother, who was working cleaning floors at another school. And in the first 3 years, I didn't have anything to do but be a teacher's helper, because the nurses had nothing better to do than to teach me ABC and this. And my uncle left a fountain pen there, which in those days it was pen and inkwells. And the nurses wanted to play with the fountain pen, so they'd teach me how to write. And then that put me behind. I didn't learn how to learn. I was 8 years of age when everyone else caught up, but I had never learned anything for 3 years. I just been around passing out things in class. And this...
Could that also be because you were bringing snakes and bats into school?
Well, that was just to take away the boredom. It was something else. And that Chuck Warner, that bastard, must have caned me 50 times. I'd come home sometimes, I couldn't hold a knife and fork in my hands from the caning. And I messed with his car. I took
here's Chuck Warner.
Yeah. No, I messed with his car a couple of times. I did the old potato up the exhaust pipe. Then I put some dead fish inside the door panel. And he used to bring these 2 teachers to school, and they wouldn't drive with him. The car stank so much. Then I put a spark plug wire from the spark plug down through the car and up under the seat, and they had springs in the seat. And so when he started up, he was going everywhere. But he knew it was me because I'd always have to look. I wanted to see it, And so whatever chance he got, he used to belt the crap out of me. But that was... That was cool.
A really long answer to that question, but that was great. Thank you. We can take some from the audience as well. Yeah. That wasn't really a question, but
I speak
okay.
highly of that fellow, too.
Let's move on from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else?
What happened there?
Right there?
You feel that Josh found George in the movie, or that George found himself?
Is that for me?
I don't want.
Yeah.
No. I'm always
Did
trying to
Josh
find
find?
myself.
Yeah.
I think, the secret of life is knowing yourself and being yourself. And it's a tough thing. If you don't watch out, 3 days can go by and you're believing someone else's bullshit. And it's, I've had a lot of wake-up calls in my life. I've had death experiences and all kinds of things that have woken me up. And I go, oh my God, I was so far off the real road, the right track, and it puts you back on it. It puts you in the here and now, which that's all there is, right? And I can't tell anybody else what to do because they've got to know themselves somehow. That's the secret of life. I find that the most difficult thing is being in the here and now and knowing that this is just an experience we're having. I'm getting religious.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll take it away.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I was confused. I thought you meant Josh Lawson finding George. Now I get it. Yeah, I think George knew himself the whole time, in my opinion. What I was really attracted to is as I'm figuring out life and trying to live my own life, and there's a million voices that surround you and are pressures on what you should or shouldn't do and what directions you should go and choices you should make. And I think, as you see in the film, and if you talk to George, he lived an incredibly authentic life to himself that many of us, I don't think, can always say. Pressures from family or anything else. He, in some ways, in funny ways, as a child, I didn't want to pay attention in school, but I didn't do what I probably would have loved to do, is bring snakes and bats into school. But even when he meets this woman at this party, Belinda, not very many of us would go up to her when her boyfriend is there. And just ask her out, And when she leaves for London, he decides, I'm just going to go for it. And similarly, when he got the job, and then when he turned down the job, I don't know. He's lived a very honest, authentic life, and that's what I loved about him as a subject. And I want to pull you in here because you have something. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Oh, look, I don't want. I mean, I think that answered the question. I'll just take the opportunity to say that. The experience was amazing for me, and I will say that Josh Greenbaum here is not only one of the best directors I've ever worked with, he's actually one of the best people. I mean that. He really is one of the greatest guys. And it was a joy to be on set every day making this, and it was such a unique film, and I'm just awfully proud of it. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to tell you all that.
Yeah, I'll let him speak mostly to this. Probably the first challenge, honestly, was Josh and I met over beers one night the first time, and I'd actually cut this whole film together with storyboards, so he got to watch kind of a cut of the film before we did the reenactments, and we basically fell in love very quickly over our barbecue, actually, in Los Angeles. Not as good as here. But one of the first challenges was, I'm sitting across from the table, and here's this guy, blue-eyed, blonde-haired. I'm like, oh, God, I wish, But, some contact lenses and some wigs, and we sort of just took the leap together. But, I mean, he's incredible. He disappeared into the role. And there are definitely some challenges making it on set. It was a unique process, which I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, that's right. So there were, as you can see in the film, some of the technical things that we had George's audio that we would sometimes, be acting alongside with. Either we'd be lip-syncing to it or using it as a guide, and then there'd be times where we would be improvising or, in fact, have entire scenes that were dialogue-driven, the airport scene where we say goodbye to Belinda and everything in between. So it was really an unusual shoot in that way. but it was strange. It felt like we were acting out somebody's memory. It was weird in that way because it wasn't like I was trying to be the real George because the real George is in the film. That would be silly to try and do that. So in a way, it was. I kind of always felt like I was George's memory of George. And I think we all romanticize our memory of ourselves. I don't think it would be impossible not to. So I hope that I represented, the way George remembered himself in a lot of ways. Because there is a stylized way to the shoot, and I always I love that style because it felt like the inside of somebody's head. It felt like we were in a play box in somebody's memory, and we were flipping through a photo book as we remembered it. And I think the film is so unique in that way.
One more?
Oh my God.
Oh, let's start here. Go ahead.
George, I'm curious if you've had any interesting conversations with other actors who stepped into either this specific role or other roles that are
I don't quite get that. What do you think?
Say it again. Sorry, we didn't quite hear.
Have you had any interesting conversations with other actors who stepped into this role?
Oh, and to any other actors who played James Bond?
Not in depth. I've.
What about when you ran into Connery with a newspaper?
Yeah, I had an article. One newspaper said that I was better than Connery, and someone gave it to me. And I went in this restaurant.
George Lazenby Chronicle.
And I went in this restaurant, and there was Sean sitting by himself, and I had it, and I went over and I sat down next to him, and I put it. He didn't look at me when I sat down, so he didn't know it was me. He probably didn't know it anyway. And I put the article in front of him, and he started to read it, and I handed it back. So I got up and I went over to where I was sitting in the restaurant with my friends, and I was looking in this bag full of money that I'd just been given for some reason or other. And Sean was walking out of the restaurant, and he went, hi, nice to meet you, George, and left. And that's how I met Sean Connery. But
I like that you carried that article around with you just in the hopes that you might.
Come on, I'm not that bad.
You just happen to have
There's
it.
a copy of that article under all of your seats.
No, it's a funny thing that I did see Connery when I used to get around with the in crowd. He was coming in a restaurant and he saw me and he went, like, don't say anything, for God's sake. He wanted to have a nice, quiet meal, and he ended up sitting right behind me with his back, and nobody kind of put two and two together, so to speak. There's Lazenby and Connery right behind each other, and I was listening to every word he said in his Scottish accent. But 2 years ago, my daughter in New York had lunch with him and Michael Caine. So there you go. She's closer to him than I am. Yeah. Well, because half a kidney, but my half kidney grew to the size of two. That's, if I'd have had half a kidney in those days in the 40s, they thought that a man can't live on half a kidney. So they said he'd probably live until he's around 12 or becoming a man, and then you'll have problems. But I didn't, because my half kidney grew to the size of two. And it's, yeah, I was racing motocross, as you saw, and I put a rib through it. And I'm in hospital, and I'm getting x-rayed, and this doctor's turning me around and around and around. He said, I hate to tell you, but one of your kidneys has collapsed. I said, I've only got one. He said, why didn't you tell me? What do you think we were doing? And then he said, well, now I've got to, he said, there's two layers in your kidney. If it's going through the second one, we've got to take it out anyway. He was angry, because he'd spent all this time rolling me around looking for my other kidney, and I didn't say anything because he didn't ask. So meanwhile, that only went through one part of my kidney. And so I lived through that motocross craziness. But I wondered why I was such a nutcase on a motorcycle, and it's the adrenaline rush you get. It's like a drug. You just get so high on it. And I made so many stupid moves when I started racing motocross. I can get him. I'm 2 yards from the finish. wow, and then you know, like, that's the ego too. You know.
We got time for one more question.
Yeah. Yeah. So it started, yeah, basically I had a lot of lunches with George, so I got to hear a lot of these stories and started in my head to shape, okay, which stories, and there are literally so many that we couldn't include. But yeah, early on I knew I wanted to use essentially what's called an Enteratron setup, which I don't know if you guys know. It's pretty interesting to look at, but I project an image of myself on a screen, and then it's on like a teleprompter like newscasters use, that they look right into the lens, and then the camera's right behind. So that's how you get George. When we were filming the interview, it was just George and I. You felt like we were talking to me, right? Because you were looking at each other. So that was always the plan, was to shoot this interview first, which is the very first step we did. We did 4 days, I think, 3 days of 6-hour interviews that George was very kind to put up with long interviews and told me all his stories. Yeah, talking about himself. And then, as I was mentioning, we then, our incredible editor, Billy McMillan, who's here. And by the way, Courtney Gleason, I forgot to say early on, our line producer's here as well. She's did an incredible job. We did not have a huge budget, and we did an incredible job putting it on screen. One other person I think I forgot to mention, Adamo Palladino, who played Peter Hunt, is here. Adamo, I don't know where you are. There he is. But we basically cut the film together and then storyboarded it all. So we had kind of a version of the film. There's a little bit of a trick. We have a green screen behind him. It's actually not. We keyed that in. We shot it practically. I wasn't sure what I wanted as his backdrop to start, and that's actually the way we did it. But it's cheated, so I'm glad you couldn't tell. Yeah. Yes. That's some budget restrictions. He's pointing out that some of our cars were not left-hand.
By the way, there was dialogue that Josh wanted to protect himself, where it's like, we had this imported from overseas, and go whack-a-doo, look at the wheels on the other side and everything. But we thought, no one's going to pick it up, you bastard.
The big mistake here was I was to deliver the car in Bristol and bring back another car. You use the same car both ways.
Well, yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Remember to cast your ballots.